This is Ask Joe, number 222, yeah.
Well, hello. Welcome to Ask Joe. My name's Joe Gilder from Home Studio Corner, and that was a little blues intro. Thanks to Johnny Lipsham for the idea to do a little bit of a bluesy thing. Pardon the lack of keyboard skills. Johnny could have played that much better than me. Hi, how are you? If you're here live, hi, I'm glad you're here live. If you're watching a recording or listening to the podcast, I'm glad you're listening as well. I'm seeing there's some problem with the stream. We're just going to let it roll because this thing has started. So hopefully people can hear me live and we'll keep things going. If this is your first time listening or watching, super glad you're here. My name's Joe Gilder. I've been running Home Studio Corner since like 2009. So if you're into home recording and making music in a home studio, then you need to go check out all the stuff I have at Home Studio Corner. There's lots and lots and lots of stuff for you to check out for free. It's super fun. So today I want to talk about something that I've been thinking about just the last couple of days, and it actually has something to do with this weird-looking book. Ooh, it makes you it looks like I'm trying to hypnotize you, actually, which perhaps I am. So this is a book I got back in 2014, so that's 4 years ago, and it came on the heels of me listening to, brace yourself, a bunch of Zig Ziglar recordings. If you don't know who Zig Ziglar is, he was a monster motivational speaker kind of guy who grew up in Yazoo City, Mississippi, which is the town I grew up in. He just preceded me by about, 60 years or so. And it does look like a Zach Wilde book, and Rob, you're totally right. And so he had this goal-setting program that he taught. Big fan of goals, setting goals, and working to achieve them. And a guy named Seth Godin, who you've probably heard of, who writes marketing books, released this book, kind of partnered up with Zig. It might have been, it's Zig's program, but Seth kind of put it together and turned it into this little workbook. Zig passed away, I think, in 2012. So the idea is you go through this whole goal-setting process where you think of all the things you want to be, do, and have, right? And you write them all down, and then you hone in, get down and get really specific until you've narrowed it down to 4 that you want to work on over the next 12-week period. So if you remember all those years ago, if you have been unfortunate enough to have followed me for that long, you may remember I did this challenge to write 50 songs in 12 weeks. This was the book. This was the book I used that kind of got me to that point. So you can see, like, on week 1, day 3, I wrote a song called A Bigger Spoon. That one didn't make it on the album. But this is what led me to that. I didn't reach any of the other goals of the 4. And actually, the idea is you fill it out every week and keep track of those goals until the 12 weeks is up. I filled it out for like 3 weeks and then I abandoned it. So it wasn't super effective in the sense that I actually used it. But the idea of setting goals is such a good thing. And I've gotten away from it. And so just recently I've set some new goals and some things I want to do in the next 12 weeks. And here's the thing. I resisted it because as the thought process goes, you think, okay, I set some goals once before, and like literally I found that book. I was looking through some old forms to find like a tax form I had to send to my accountant. And as I was looking through, I found that little book, and I flipped through. I was like, oh, remember when I was doing those goals? That's fun. And I had this wave of like shame because I could see all the goals I didn't reach. And ignored the one that I hit, like this Write 50 Songs goal, which was a huge goal that I would never have done had I not set the goal. I ignored that entirely and just focused on the ones I didn't achieve. Does that sound like anything you might do? Yeah, I think it's part of the human/creative person condition. But so the conclusion you draw is, well, I didn't hit my goal that one time, and now I'm feeling some pain because of that, so I'm not going to set any goals because what if I don't get them? And so you don't get them. And I sent an email out this morning where I quoted Zig Ziglar, where he's talking about people who are talking about like doing something or saying, if it's going to take me 10 years to get my master's degree so I can do that thing I've always wanted to do, I'm going to be 50 in 10 years. And the question goes, well, how old will you be in 10 years if you don't get the master's degree? Which is kind of funny, but also like gets to a point of, hey, I just totally lost my train of thought. It proves the point of you're going to be living your life anyway. Why not move towards something? And even if you don't get it, if you get part of the way there, that's probably way better than you would have done if you hadn't done anything. There's the old Wayne Gretzky quote that's probably way too overused, but you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. I would have never written 50 songs if I never set myself up to fail. And had I failed, last year is a great example. 2017, I set a goal to write and record 4 EPs. 1, 2, 3, 4. And if you've watched some of my videos lately, you've seen me talk about how I only did 3. I never did the 4th one. And on each of the 3 album covers for 1, 2, and 3, I put on there EP 1 of 4, 2 of 4, 3 of 4, with every intention of doing the 4th one. Well, it just didn't happen. I didn't make the time. I got into other things. We moved. Plenty of excuses, whatever. I didn't do it. Now, was that a failure? Well, I didn't reach my goal, but I released like 10 songs or something. 3 EPs, completely different styles of music. Not completely, but 3 different collections of songs. And it was so much fun, and I got so much joy out of it. It was really good for me musically. It was good for my business. It was good for the music side of things, for the home studio corner side of things. It was just all around a great, great year in that regard, even though I completely did not hit my goal. So it's the idea of, if you set a goal to make $1 million in a year and you only get halfway there, guess what? That's a great year, right? So there's this thinking that, well, if I set a goal and I miss it, that's going to be worse than if I don't set a goal at all. And it's like that old, I'm saying all sorts of cliches today, so forgive me. We'll get to your questions in a second. It's like that old cliche, 'tis better to have loved and lost than to never have loved at all. It's hard to believe sometimes, especially if you're on the heels of like a heartbreak or a breakup or a loved one dying, which is just tragic and horrible. But would you rather have never known that person? Of course not. And I feel like it's the same, especially for us, especially if you're in a home recording world where you're spending your extra time in the studio, so you don't have 40 hours a week to spend in the studio. A lot of folks I interact with are getting in there a little bit here and a little bit there. And in those situations, I think it's even more important to have some goals and objectives that you're going after. Otherwise, you just come down to the studio, and I'm guilty of this, and you sit down and you just tinker, or you pull up a new plugin you bought and you just futz around with it for an hour, not really accomplishing anything. And then you go back up, and watch Netflix, and then you come back down the next night, and you end up doing that over and over for a period of months, and you really, I could say, hey, let me listen to something you're working on, and you have nothing to show me. I'm not saying that to bring out any shame in you. I think I'm saying it because we don't realize we're doing it a lot of the time. So like I've had periods in my life where, especially early on when I was doing Home Studio Corner, where I stopped making very much music, and I was just like writing articles and making videos. And I realized very quickly my work that I was doing wasn't very good because I wasn't making music. And there's a part of me that always needs to be making music because I was made for that. And when I wasn't doing it, just things weren't going as well for me. So I don't say if you're not making music, you're a bad person. I think if you're not making music, you're not doing the thing that you really want to be doing. I don't think any of us grew up dreaming of playing with audio plugins all day. I think we grew up dreaming of making music. And maybe that's going to look very different now than it looked when you were dreaming about it when you were 13, but we still have the opportunity to make great music and to make lots of it and to create a whole body of work. And to me, that's super exciting, but you got to have a direction to it. That make sense? Boom. All right, that's enough from me. I promise I probably won't quote any more Zig Ziglar for the rest of the day. The rest of this episode, I'm just going to focus on you, and your questions. So if you have questions, I want you to ask them here in the chat, and I will try to get to as many of them as I can. If you asked one a while ago, I might not be able to get to it or see it because there's been a lot of conversation in between. So go ahead and ask it again, and then I will do my best to get to it. Let's see. Craig Higgins says, Joe, prior to sending files to a mix engineer, would you advise doing subtractive EQ or filtering as needed, for example, or would you leave that to the mix engineer? I absolutely would leave that to the mix engineer. If you're hiring someone or having someone mix your song, then you're hiring them to make those decisions, because on some level you trust them to make those decisions more than yourself. That's totally fine. So doing some of that EQ to me doesn't make a lot of sense. The only times I'll EQ or like process something before I send it to someone is if that, like if I'm recording guitars for somebody and it's someone maybe who doesn't have a lot of experience, or I don't know if they're going to know to roll off that frequency and to get it to sound kind of more natural sounding. So I may do a little EQ before I send it off. But in general, it's the mix engineer's job to do that. And I would leave that for them, because what you might cut might actually be something they want to keep. And if you trust their experience more than you, then I would let them do it all. It's not like you're saving them that much time anyway. If it's coming from a place of the tracks are embarrassing sounding because you didn't record them very well, I get that. Then maybe there's a scenario where you do a little bit of fixing here and there to fix it up. But ultimately, I'd say just send it on to them. Don Hamers here says he tried my butter compression from the video earlier this week and it worked well. I love me some good butter compression. If you don't know what that is, go search for a video on how to mix acoustic guitar, butter compression. I don't use it a lot on acoustic. I don't compress acoustic a lot, but when I do, I don't always compress acoustic, but when I do, I butter that sucker up. When a person says printing a mix, what does that mean? It just means exporting, bouncing. In the olden days, they would take the have a 24-track tape machine, play it through a console, and then they would, to get to finish, they would have to print the mix somewhere. It'd have to go on some piece of medium, so they would run it to like a 1/4 inch or 1/2 inch or whatever, a smaller 2-channel tape machine, and record the mix there. That was printing the mix. So that lingo is carried over, just like we say record. I'm not making a record, it's a digital, but saying I'm making an MP3 doesn't sound the same. So that's all it means. It just means your final bounce, your final mix, what have you. Steve Rossbotham says, so after your kind comments, I'm struggling to get people to listen to my music. Any suggestions? So before the episode started, Steve, who goes by the artist name Linwood, just released 2 songs. And Steve and I are friends on Facebook, and I saw him post about them, so I went and listened to them, and they were delightful. So go check them out. But he was saying he's having a hard time getting people to listen. That's the thing, right? I love music, and I make music for a living. But even when I see a lot of people that come through my feed, if it's just, hey, listen to my music, you're essentially saying, hey, I want you to go take, like you scrolling Facebook and you're watching like 4-minute or like 8-second videos and you're watching like 2-second GIFs and things like that. I want you to stop what you're doing and go invest, 20 times that amount of time to listen to my 5-minute song. Totally reasonable. And you've listened to that song 1,000 times, so it makes sense that you would expect other people to want to listen to it. You got to sell people. You got to give people a reason. You got to make it valuable for them. So just saying, hey, listen to my song, some people will. People who know you well, people who maybe knew you were working on an album, will go listen to it. Like I know you obviously from Ask Joe, and that's the main place where I see your name pop up the most. So I don't think that would be why I would watch it. But if you're trying to get more people to watch it, then you gotta make it more interesting. I'm not saying your music isn't interesting, but to get them to even listen to it. So that might mean making video versions of it. That might mean creating some shorter videos where you say, hey, I don't know if you knew this, but for the last X number of years, I've gotten into home recording, and for the last X number of months, I've been working on 2 new songs. The first song is called this, and it's about this, and I don't know what the content needs to be, but creating content around the music is the name of the game, right? Just like if I use this as an example, it's not a perfect example, but with Home Studio Corner. So whether, Steve, I can't remember. I think you're a VIP member. I think maybe you've bought some of my courses before, but even if not, if I just created my YouTube channel and all I did was say, hey, everybody, come watch my YouTube channel, it would get a few people, but probably not that many. Or if I only put videos up that said, hey, go buy one of my courses. It's like, hey, good morning. My name's Joe from homestudiocorner.com. You should go buy a course. Thanks for watching. See ya. There's not a lot of value there, right? So if you can create content that is interesting and compelling, doesn't have to be informative. You don't have to teach anything necessarily. There's plenty of content out there that we watch because it's simply entertaining or interesting. If you can create content, that's what people are really looking for. And if then you maybe use the music as the background music for that content, and you mention the music and maybe even feature the music, like this content is about that song that you're hearing in the background, go over here and check it out. That's more compelling to me and gives me more of a reason to go listen to it, because everyone's being bombarded with all sorts of messages. And so your message needs to stand out, and having just great music just isn't good enough. It has to be there, right? You can't do any of the other things we're talking about unless you make great music. But once just making the great music and moving on isn't enough. Then you've got to become a marketer. You got to become a content creator. You got to find ways to make people interested to watch and listen to your music. So, for example, I don't know if this is a perfect example for what you're asking, but I see Caitlin and Ben from Homestead Collective are here on this live stream. And so I produced a Christmas EP for them back in December, which sounds really great. And I hate that it's Christmas because now I can tell you to go listen to it, but you probably won't till next Christmas. Then I'll tell you about it. But they do a lot of cool things in between making music. They play a lot of shows, one for one thing, but they also make a lot of videos. Like I think they do at least one monthly video where they're making like a music video around a song. So it's got these beautiful elements. It looks nice. That's something I'm more compelled to go listen to the music while I'm watching a music video than if they said, hey, listen to this MP3. Or, hey, go to iTunes and go look up our name and then go find the thing. And it's hard to find sometimes, but you can find it and then you can listen to it. There's just a lot more work involved. So the easier you can make it for people to listen to your music and package it in different ways that people will like, the better chances you'll have of building that up. Also, I'm talking way too much on this, but I think it's important and it applies to so many more things than just getting people to listen to your music. If you just sit in solitude for 3 months and you make a record, and then you come out of the gates and you say, hey, I made a record. You should listen to it. And then every day, hey, I made a record. You should listen to it. Then the next day, hey, I made a record. You should listen to it. Then the next day, hey, I made a record. You should listen to it. People are going to get annoyed with you. A, they didn't know you made a record. So you gave them no indication that this was coming. And then you're just like super excited for a period and then you stop. What would make sense is you talk about it as you go. Hey, I wrote a great song. I'm excited to record this. Hey, here's a clip of me playing that song, or here's the rough loop that I put together for that song. And so people are with you and they're seeing you, because I'm not going to see every one of your Facebook posts, but I'll see the occasional one. So if I see a trend where you're talking about something that you're working on, I'm going to be more inclined to listen when the thing is done, especially if the content along the way is really interesting. So like you make content to get people interested in the thing that you haven't even finished yet. Then when the thing comes out, you're releasing more content about the thing that's finished and you're finding new and creative ways to make it interesting. I don't know if that makes sense, but I've given you a lot of ideas and I hope that applies to more than just Steve. That was a really, really long answer. So let's try to blow through a few more. Thomas says, would you consider using the lyrics or credits functionality of DistroKid? Absolutely. I've had albums before where I'm listening to it, and if you tap it, or maybe it just does it by itself, the lyrics just pop up. That's super interesting to me, because it's not always clear what people are singing and saying. It's nice to have it there, especially as a songwriter. I don't do a good job of making my lyrics available. If you buy directly from JoeGilderMusic.com, I think Nimbit puts the lyrics in the MP3, but DistroKid historically hasn't, and now they do. So absolutely lyrics, and I think credits is cool. A lot of people think it's cooler than others. For me, I don't think there's a lot of money to be made. Like if Ben and Caitlin don't forget to put my name in the credits on their DistroKid thing for something I produced, I don't care as much, but I could see, especially if you're a songwriter and things like that, or you're only behind the scenes and you're not like a front person artist, it's nice to have your name out there, because we don't have albums to look at the credits as much anymore, right? So if you can look at it digitally, I'm listening to this record and I can hit that and see who produced it, where it was recorded, who played bass. Those are interesting things. Is it like life-changing things? I don't know, but it is kind of interesting. Kip said, I would like people to listen to, but I just want to finish an EP. Trying to take your advice in 2018. Written a bunch, just can't get the accompaniment right. Keep at it, dude. And maybe try playing with other musicians. Sometimes if you can't get, like I'll have an idea for an arrangement and then I'll just go in the studio and record it. And depending on what Tim Horsley plays on drums, I change my approach completely, or I change my guitar part, or I ditch acoustic guitar altogether and just make it electric. I'd say get it pretty close and then just book a session and see what happens. I think you'd be surprised. Letting other people do their thing on your music might actually solve your accompaniment problem. You don't have to have it all figured out before. You keep using Caitlin and Ben as examples. They came here. I knew what songs they were going to record. They had sent me like rough recordings of them that were kind of produced already. And I had a couple suggestions about lyrics, and we made like a little bit of arrangement decisions. But otherwise, they just showed up and we figured it out. And that's what made it so fun. If you haven't seen that video, it's Christmas music still. But go back. There's a Gilder cam I did where I'm producing Homestead Collective's Christmas EP. Super fun. You get to see a little bit of kind of how that process went. Tim E. Hey, Tim, I got your email earlier today. Says, I have a bass track on one of my current songs. It's an audio track from a friend of mine. When I put compression on it, I hear the pick so loud it sounds like a click. How do I remove it? Well, not to state the obvious, but maybe it doesn't need to be compressed. That's one option. Is the compression giving you enough good things to make it worth dealing with that sound of the pick? Secondly, is it really a problem in the mix? Are you hearing it over everything else, or is it just something you hear in solo that actually doesn't matter? And then finally, if it's probably a consistent frequency, so you could probably go in, take a notch, right, that boost up fairly narrow, and just find that sound and then do like a really narrow cut there, and that might get rid of it as well. Those are my 3 solutions. Rob Nordvik, what's up, brother? Says, on a track I'm currently working on, my drummer used a non-ported 26-inch kick drum, and it's really boomy and floppy sounding. How should I compress it to make it tighter and punchier? Great question. So it's funny, we were talking about this. Don Hamer, who's here, is working on a video, I think, where he recorded a non-ported kick drum. It's different. The biggest thing you can do is to, on the recording session, I know you're surprised I'm going to say this, is to get it sounding as good as you can before you record it, right? So that's going to mean moving the mic in probably different places. I found right in the middle of the drum, about a fist away, gave me the best sound I could get out of when I did that for, we used the house kit for my EP Fighter. So we recorded it at Derek West's studio, and Tim played that kit, and it wasn't ported. So we did, Tim being a great drummer and recordist, said, try putting the mic right here, and we did, and that sounded good. But we moved it around a lot before ever recording. That's just a part of the process. So after the fact, I mean, EQ is going to be your friend, taking mid-range out, boosting certain low end, like the deep low end might help make it not sound so floppy. I don't know if compression's the answer. And I also don't know if you can fix it. It may be a situation where samples make sense. Sample replace. It may be a situation where you just play around with some aggressive compression settings, or duplicating it and compressing one of them really heavily and one not. Those are some options. Obviously, without hearing it, there's not a lot of specifics I can give you, but those are some things I definitely would try, something in that ballpark. Paul says, I remember Johnny Lipsham saying most people only listen to the first few seconds of a song online. So how important is an intro? I think intros have always been important. If you bore me, or the guitar's out of tune, or it's this, it's just not interesting, then yeah, I might be more interested, might be moving on. I think it's all important, right? It's kind of like, is it the most important part of the song? Probably not, but in some ways it is. Because if they don't get past the intro to verse 1, where you state your brilliant first lyric, then it doesn't matter. So I don't know. It's interesting. It's an interesting concept, but the song has to be good, and being a good song, part of that means having a good intro. And knowing how to do an intro. Do you do a 4-bar intro, 8-bar intro? Do you just start right in on verse 1? Do you start with a chorus and then a verse? Those are all decisions you have to make, and you learn a lot by listening to other people's music and paying attention to how they structured things. Did they do the full chord progression for the intro? Was it the chord progression for the verse, or did they use the chord progression from the chorus as the intro and then switch to the verse chords? That's a little more interesting than playing GC, 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 and then the verse is all GC, 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 GC. By the time you get to the chorus, people are bored. I mean, those are the kind of things. But otherwise, I don't know if there's any real practical advice other than, yes, make it interesting. Alan Collins, one of my longest running VIP members, says, in the UK we have a radio program called Desert Island Disc. 7 songs a guest would choose if stranded on an island. Maybe you could do a podcast of 7 you would choose if stranded. That's interesting. 7 songs I would choose if stranded. I almost want to answer it right now, but I don't think I could. I don't know if I'd. Yeah, I wouldn't be able to do it right now. But that's interesting. I'll think on it. There's a lot of good songs out there. It's a good exercise. Okay, sorry, I didn't have an answer though. Rob says, back to the question about the kick drum, says it was recorded by the drummer that he just gets the stems from, so he has no control over mic placement. This is a great place to diplomatically engage that person of like, hey, I love the performance, I love this, I love that. One thing I had to work a little harder on, if you can do it and you have that kind of relationship, let me come over if it's possible, and let's work on the kick drum sound. I think it could be better, or give him some suggestions for things to try, things like that. You got to be careful there, but for example, for some clients, when I've mixed for them, sometimes they'll say, hey, if you hear anything that I can do to make it better, please let me know. When they do that, I actually listen and I give them suggestions. Otherwise, if you can and you can broach it and they're the kind of person that can hear constructive criticism, then you can say, hey, this is finished, this is great. Next time you record this, here's some ideas or challenges I ran into that if you did a better job at this, maybe this would work better. Phil says, hi, Joe. Dumb question, maybe. At which point did you decide that a song is ready for mastering? And what do you feel mastering brings to a mix? Can you master your own songs? Yes, you can master your own stuff. I've learned a lot from Ian Shepherd as far as mastering goes. Ian has mastered some of my stuff, and I've mastered the most recent stuff. It's just a thing that comes with experience. You can make a good argument to having someone else master it just for the sake of having someone else lend their ears to it. So they can hear things that maybe you've gone ear blind to steal was that a Febreze commercial? But how do you know when to send it to mastering? The question is, how do you know when a mix is done? And to me, that answer is you get to a point where you're starting to ask the question, is this done? And then you sit down and you listen and you don't touch anything. You take notes about changes you want to make. Then you make those changes. Then you listen and you make notes and you just keep doing that process till you're done. You got to get to a point where you stop and listen from start to finish without touching anything and you only listen. Then you take those notes and try to really just stick to that list. That's part of how I know when I'm done. Also, once you've mixed a lot of songs, you'll be able to get there faster. It won't be as much of a mystery to you. What are your top 3 selling courses? Understanding EQ, understanding compression, and then probably my VIP membership, just in general, because then VIP members tend to be better customers because they're more connected and they get a discount on other courses too. Dueling mixes, which isn't really a course, but that would be probably the top one. You should make a Spotify playlist with your references at the time. Ooh, that's a great idea. Send me an email about that. That's a great idea. Spotify playlist of kind of songs that I think sound great would make good references for different mixes. Any word on DAW control for Studio Live? I haven't had a lot of time to test it out much. I did, you may remember a few episodes back, updated to the beta version of the firmware and then it crapped out and stopped working, so I had to regress back to a previous version and I haven't gone back yet. I need to. Actually, PreSonus and I have a deal. I'm going to do a series of videos on DAW mode once it's out. It just wasn't working perfectly for me. So yes, I will check it out and I'll do I think I'm doing 25 videos for them specifically on details about DAW mode. Should be cool. Any word? Oh, I just answered that one. What are your mix bus plugins? It changes some. Currently, I can't pull up a mix because I'm recording. Currently, obviously a compressor, which I just use the stock compressor in Studio One. And then I have a multi-band compressor, which Ian Shepherd would say is a bad idea. But I basically put the same type of settings I would use if I was using it in mastering. And it just does something. Mostly it's just compressing the mid-range to where it holds that down a little bit. So if mid-range is the thing that builds up the most in a mix usually, because vocals sit there, guitars sit there, a lot of drums sit there. So it kind of, when that gets a little loud, it just takes those down, which means I have to work less hard on the mix itself to get those mid-frequencies to kind of be tame. I like what it does most of the time on a mix. I don't always put it on there, but it's there waiting for me. And then I've been putting some sort of an Neve EQ, like the vintage EQ in Studio One on the Fat channel, and just using the high and low shelves to just kind of carve low end and high end in case the mix is a little too bright, a little too dark. Put that at the very end of the chain just to make some overall adjustments. And that's about it. I'll occasionally put something else, but those are the main ones right now. And if you ask me in a year, it'll be different probably. I'm running out of time. Let's see. Do you go with parallel processing for every instrument? No. Ezekiel, I don't do parallel processing. I don't do anything on every instrument. I don't even EQ every instrument. I only do stuff if it needs it. Parallel processing is something I do only if I can't make it work with a compressor, and I only compress if I listen to the sound and I think that sound needs compression because I know what compression will do to that sound, and that's the sound I want for this mix. So you got to be really careful when you start doing anything by default. Always be intentional and do it on purpose. I'm out of time. See y'all next week.